At the start of Chapter 9, it goes over what cognitive method is and the learning strategies related to it. All students need to have encouragement, guidance, and practice in order to use their higher order thinking. The research shows that not only does the instruction need to be integrated with strategies, but it also has to be repeated over a long period of time. According to the text, cognitive methods are mostly related to cognitive, metacognitive, and social affective strategies, and sometimes another category called cross-linguistic strategies. As a review, cognitive learning strategies involve the mental and/or physical manipulation of information, such as classifying items, linking new information to background knowledge, and summarizing. Metacognitive learning strategies combine awareness of one's cognitive abilities, the ability to decide how difficult a task is, and knowing how and when to use strategies. Specific strategies would be things like skimming, answering comprehension questions, and reflecting on one's learning. Social affective learning strategies are defined as the use of socially mediated learning and efforts to lower one's affective filter and have students interacting with peers to understand content and appropriate socialization. Positive self-talk is a great affective strategy. Cross-linguistic strategies were also covered in my section on the text. They are new in the research field and is related to code switching, which is when a student has ability to communicate in multiple languages in one conversation, but socially decides which to use based on the context. The text also points out how successful bilingual students translate meaning, not word for word, when they read, and they use similar strategies and processes in both L1 and L2. It would be helpful for teachers to teach directly how L1 can help L2 for our CLD students.
According to pages 320 to 324, we are able to see what learning strategies help contribute to more successful language learners and what things contribute to less successful language learners. More successful language learners rely on background knowledge, previous language and experiences, also through making predictions and inferences. More successful language learners are also more likely to better use strategies, adapt to situations, and focus more on the meaning of content rather than the language of it. On the flip side, less successful language learners use less strategy to solve problems and focus generally on form and structure rather than meaning. When it comes to facilitating these strategies for more successful language learning, we look at the CALA method, or CALLA, which is focused on explicitly teaching language learners to understand and tactically apply metacognitive, cognitive, and social affective strategies. The CALA method gives language learners the toolkit they need to solve problems, decode things, and reflect on their own learning. These strategies can include, but are not limited to, graphic organizers, self-monitoring, predicting and making inferences, asking questions, and cooperative learning. The CALA method also follows a 5-stage process. First, preparation, then presentation, followed by practice, self-evaluation, and expansion.
In this section, we start off by looking at the cognitive levels of Bloom's taxonomy on page 325. The cognitive levels of Bloom's taxonomy include knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. By using the verbs within the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, we will be able to create objectives which will help students to move towards appropriate levels of cognitive engagement. The remainder of this section discussed recommendations to promote CLD student success in the areas of language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. A few of the key points for student success within language arts include select literature that reflects the identity of your CLD students, have students and/or teachers read the text aloud to enhance speaking and listening skills, pre-read to uncover background knowledge, and the use of graphic organizers. Some of the math recommendations include using authentic problems and real-life solutions, the use of practical application problems, cooperative learning, and connect concepts to background knowledge of your students by asking them to write their own word problems. Recommendations for science include the use of images, background information, and sequence words, focusing on the correct aspects of student responses rather than on the errors, and the use of hands-on activities. Social studies recommendations are using pre-reading and pre-writing activities to determine background knowledge of students, incorporate community and parental involvement, invite guest speakers, and use of graphic organizers.
The first section of text that I'm presenting on is about the preparation phase and practice, shown on the left side of the screen. In the preparation phase, teachers plan content objectives that are based on standards, language objectives, and learning strategy objectives that include cognitive, social affective, and metacognitive strategies. As shown in the picture, teachers can display these objectives in simplified language, such as I can statements, so students can understand and self-assess more easily. Teachers should ensure that the objectives are incorporated, referred to, and reflected on throughout the lesson. In our text, the following example is given to show how students can self-assess during the lesson. After the activity, students refer to the displayed objectives and rate their written work with a smiley face to show they met the objective. I added the smiley face understanding image to show how easily this strategy could be incorporated into our lessons. I also added the image of the thumbs up, sideways, and down as another way that students can easily and quickly reflect on the progress towards meeting the objectives during a lesson. The second section of text that I'm presenting on is about the presentation phase in practice. Our text emphasizes the importance of making new information meaningful to students, adding visuals to oral presentations, and demonstrating skills and strategies that students are expected to do. An example from our text is using an interactive whiteboard to present, which is represented in the image of the teacher drawing. Even though not all teachers have an interactive whiteboard, there are so many ways that digital presentation can be used, such as Google Slides, Nearpod, Prezi, Pear Deck, and more that can be projected onto a whiteboard. The fraction pizza image represents the presentation example from our text to use large laminated pictures and allow groups to be involved in the demonstration by using the laminated pictures for learning. There are also many digital formats available that students can use to manipulate if principles and objects are not available in your classroom. Choosing to use a pizza also allows for the real-world connection for using fractions in the lesson. After learning about this, we can all reflect and improve on our preparation and presentation of lessons to improve instruction for CLD and all of our students.
The presentation involves looking at the practice phase of CALA. In the practice phase of CALA, students are actively practicing. This involves hands-on activities and is much more student-centered. It allows students to be able to collaborate and practice the new concepts. The activities are scaffolded by the teacher, providing more support at the opening of the lesson and less as the students begin to understand the skill or concept and can apply it on their own with success. This particular practice phase reminded me a lot of a modified I do, we do, you do type strategy. The teacher needs to make sure to continue to support and provide feedback as students work collaboratively. If students are recognized as having a lesser understanding of a concept, then the teacher may consider forming a small group to provide further support with those students. Moving on, after practicing, students go to the evaluation stage. This stage is essentially a self-evaluation stage to determine where they feel they are at with their understanding of the concept. This may be done through a variety of tools such as rubrics, checklists, rating scales, etc. The evaluation phase, however, does not complete the end of the student's learning. Following the evaluation phase is the expansion phase. This phase focuses on the transfer of learning into the students' own lives. It is when students are able to make connections between the language and the content taught and how it is applicable in the real world. This may involve restructuring prior learning and adapting it with new learning.
Choosing learning strategies with CALA. This section is about choosing learning strategies with care and using the KISS method. Keep it simple. First, align the strategy to content and language objective so that the students can demonstrate their knowledge in those objectives. The point of the strategy is to help the students meet the objectives and to know how they got there using their metacognition skills. The authors recommend using transferable strategies, meaning ones that they can use in multiple content areas to start off. Pick a strategy or two to start using with your students, but stick with those strategies until the students have mastered how to use them effectively in multiple situations. One easy way to maximize the introduction of any new strategy is to use material that the students have seen before or is simpler, so they can focus on the strategy along with the material. Lastly, pick a research-based strategy to use with the CLD students. Proven content strategies for the task, like reading strategies or math strategies, are key to keeping it simple. A biography-driven instructional lesson uses strategies like the CALA method, but it emphasizes using the students' prior knowledge to gain new knowledge and language skills. This is done through 3 phases: activation, connection, and affirmation. The activation phase is to uncover the students' prior knowledge, and the connection phase is to use the strategies to connect the students' existing knowledge to the new content. The last phase is having students document their new learning in the affirmation phase to show that they have met the content and language objectives.